Good morning, everyone. Today's Wednesday, 10 a.m., 10:07 to be exact, and that means that we're coming back with another episode of the Canadian Immigration Live Q&A. Today, there are three of us, Mark, Alicia, and I, and we're waiting for people to pile in. So when you tune in, let us know where you tune in from. Give us a shout out. We'll give you a shout out. Leave your comments, and then as soon as we have more people watching this live stream, we'll start answering your questions. But in the meantime, Alicia and Mark, how are you guys doing?
Doing well, Igor, and I'm just going to be like a cameo appearance today because I've got to run to meet some clients downtown. But doing well, and Mark, you're back from the
I
U.S.
am. Yeah, back from the American Immigration Lawyer Association conference, and I'd say about 25 to 30% of my consultations are kind of US based these days. Lots of interesting things happening down south, and no shortage of things happening up here. So, the life of an immigration lawyer or a US immigration attorney is definitely more complex than it ever has been in the history of these practices. And I think that's a fair statement. And Alicia, over the last while, like I talk with all of the our US colleagues down there and all the removals from the US, and it's just a real crazy chaotic thing right now, and the government down there is using every mechanism possible to find ways to remove people. Well, you know what, as I told them, I said, look, I get it. They're targeting certain individuals. By and large, a lot of them are individuals that are out of status or have other issues, admissibility, who knows what it is. But up here in Canada, our government are going out of their way to remove people that are in valid status, who have paid thousands of dollars to study, who are on work permits, who have given and sacrificed so much. And it is so hard practicing as an immigration lawyer these days. Now, I'm going to qualify that. It pales in comparison to the people that we meet with each day. But my heart is just like, it is just in despair for people. And countless times, we had our English class last night, and we do that every evening, every Tuesday evening. We're taking a little break over the summer. Then we're going to start our free English classes here in Lethbridge again in September. But one of the students came to me and literally tears after the class saying, look, I don't know if I have any options, and I've sacrificed so much to be here. And they come to us and say, can you help me? And there was a time, Alicia, when I could, and Igor, when I could solve everything. There was always a pathway forward. But with the shackles that have been placed on us, we have very, very few options to be able to meaningfully fix situations. And if people fall in that cohort of that group of people where the government just wants you to go home, well, there is not a lot of avenues that are available. And I guess this is a good opportunity to point people to our Times Up series, and I encourage you to go take a look at those and just educate yourself. And we're here to help you guys wherever we can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So on this note, let's focus on some positives. So we'll give shout outs to our viewers. So Aisha from Montreal, and then John from Canada. We're in Canada as well. And then we do have a couple of more hellos. So Hernandez says, "Hi guys, hope all is well with you. Thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us. Really helpful." And then our faithful follower Spidey from Fugu, and
China
then
now.
yeah, I'll not try to pronounce that. The most rural area in the province in China. And then we do have Charlotte from Chad. And Charlotte, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte, you are the best candidate to immigrate to
Yep.
Canada these days. Fluent in
Yep.
English and French. Well, you're in the right place. You're in the right place for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We have Ibrahim from Sudbury.
Great to see you, Ibrahim.
And I think that's about it. And then the rest of the viewers just asking questions. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Before we begin with the questions, a couple of things that we wanted to raise in this live Q&A um, is the Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada departmental plan. So I'll collapse this comment and we'll flip the screen, And while all three of us are still on a call, let's talk about this. So, Alicia, I think you shared the link this morning with us. So
Yeah.
maybe you can briefly um, tell us what this is all about, right?
Yeah, and so we were waiting for this. It's kind of like a business plan for a federal government department. And so usually it's going to have, all right, what are the plans that they want to deliver? What are the core responsibilities and what are their markers of success? So what are they tracking in order to try to determine if they've met those key performance indicators or milestones on their plan? And it does give us a little bit of insight into what they're tracking and what they're looking at, focusing on for the next little while. And so this plan was released a couple days ago, I think on the 20th, and it's for the 2025-2026 departmental plan. So you can search this up. It's, they have a summary of it, but it's more interesting if you drill down into the details. They are staying on track with freezing and reducing the temporary residents to no more than 5% of total population, and they are on track with keeping the permanent residents numbers less than 1% of our population nationally as well. And so you can see in here that we actually do have some markers about what's going on with visitors, what's going on with students. They have, okay, what were the levels plan numbers that they were trying to achieve? Did they achieve them? And then they also have some like service standards and then I guess maybe results from surveys showing what's the level of satisfaction for people who are going through these different programs. So IRCC does do a number of surveys, and so they work this into the report as well. So they talk about economic benefits of temporary residents. They talk about key risks for different categories. I think it is interesting. So they've broken it down by a couple of categories, the core responsibilities for visitors, students, and temporary workers. And then they have broken it down also by the permanent residents. And so when we look at the temporary workers, we know that that's going to cover the students. And Igor's got another item to share on students and an updated plan here. But they also talk about the core responsibilities. So we know LMIAs are still still a world of hurt. It is possible if you're looking at high wage LMIAs, but low wage LMIAs are very, very difficult given our unemployment rates. And then we are still looking at permanent residents, of course. So core responsibility 2 is the immigrant and refugee selection and integration. And so it is interesting to look in here because Mark and I and Igor are always looking for what's going on with express entry. And so if you dig down deep enough into this, you will see that it talks about express entry. Potential permanent residents are selected for immigration to Canada. So if you look at DR3, then it talks about the levels plan. It talks about express entry. They're managing the intake through the Federal High Skill Program, specifically CEC and FSW. And overall, guys, they keep talking about French. So French is in here as well, and that's because of the Official Languages Act. And so it's not an IRCC initiative, it's an Official Languages Act mandate that is spilling over into operational requirements for IRCC. But when we look at the federal skilled worker and express entry, so I don't know, Igor, if you keep going down to the DR3, there's another subsection. If you kind of keep scrolling, yeah, DR3, potential permanent residents are selected for immigration to Canada. So this is where they talk about the intake volumes, and then they do show that they want to keep those numbers pretty small. And so they're talking about, when they talk about express entry, they say they're going to be looking at category-based rounds and the following categories. So if you look at that bullet point, it says the following categories: strong French language skills, work experience in the fields of healthcare and social services, trades, and education. And so those are the winners, right? So it's important to know that this is where IRCC is going to be focusing their category-based draws for express entry.
Mm-hmm. Social services, insurance brokers, everybody. So if you're one of those, you're in luck. Ironically, I had a consult with someone yesterday who there was a little bit of some mix-ups with her representative that was helping them, and they put the wrong date in her work history. So she actually was given more points than she should have been, which then resulted in her application getting terminated. And she was pretty down on her luck. And I said, well, let's take a look and see what we have here. Let's see if there's a chance that you can still get an ITA. And lo and behold, what does she have? But about a little over a year work experience as an insurance broker. And I said, did you know this is on the targeted list for science, technology, engineering, math? I don't know how that fits in there, but you know, it's there. And I said, look, the score that you have, that's 420, 522, could be enough for CEC, but if there's a category-based draw, you got a really good shot at it. So I said, hang in there. Now she was already transitioned to a visitor status. So you can imagine for her, you know, every day she's just wondering, is this going to be the day when my time is up? So
Yeah. And it's hard because they don't mention STEM, right? And so maybe they're not going to be drawing any STEM. And so we'll have to see. They do talk a little bit about targets for economic categories. And it's weird. They specifically mention the startup visa program and the self-employed program, maybe because there are huge backlogs in there. And then they talk about the PNPs and the Atlantic Immigration Program. And they do talk about IRCC trying to facilitate work permits with the provinces to try to save the people who are already in the queue. So we'll have to see how that plays out as well. They talk a little bit of about spousals and family reunification. And then, of course, they're tightening up everything that's going on with asylum and refugee claimants.
yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, how this new bill plays out, and these powers that the minister is going to receive. I don't anticipate it being shut down. I don't. I see this going forward, and it's going to be. We think we have uncertainty now. Well, we'll see what the world of immigration looks like in a few months.
Yeah.
And on that note, guys, I'm gonna sign off and leave it in your
Alicia,
capable hands.
you
But
bet.
have a good rest of the live.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye, Alicia. All right, Mark. So it's just two of us.
Here we go. Okay. Oh my
We also
goodness.
have one more update to share with our viewers.
Mm.
And this one is also very important. So what I'm talking about here is, let me see, I'll just, I'm just gonna add you here as well. Sorry, it's all
No, it's all
happening
good.
in the
We're here.
process.
I'm back.
Okay, so one thing that we briefly touched on, but now we need to share more details with our viewers on this topic, is the update to the field of study requirement. So this is another attempt to reduce the number of people who are coming to Canada, who are staying in Canada after they complete their studies. And essentially, if you study in a non-degree program, so program that is not a bachelor's, master's, doctoral degree program, you must study in a 1 year or 2 year program that teaches you the subjects that belong to a specific field of study, right? So we used to have almost 1,000 field of studies, I think. And so just recently, on June 25th, actually today, they've removed 178 field of studies and they've added only 119. So they shrink down the number of eligible field of studies. And now we have 920 of them. So make sure you go and check the list of eligible fields of study, and then check all currently eligible, and then you can search by your field of study and see if you're eligible for the postgrad. But that's really important because essentially what they say is that people who submit their application for a study permit starting today will no longer be eligible for the postgrad if their field of study was removed from the list.
Yeah. And just to clarify for everyone, this is submitting who applied for a study permit before June 25th. So as of today, June 25th, if you are going down a path and you got admission to a school and you have not yet applied for your study permit, you need to make darn sure that your program of study is now on this new list, this 920 field list. Because if not, the consequence is you will not be eligible for a postgrad work permit. And in the current world we're in right now, that is a very, very important component to any program that you're choosing to study in Canada. Very important.
Yeah. And Mark, it's also important to add here that even if you submitted your application yesterday, but it fell on a 25th of June by the UTC time zone and you got your acknowledgement of receipt, you're also excluded from this.
Yeah.
And so if it happened that you submitted your study permit application yesterday, though I understand like the chances that our viewers would submit their study permits yesterday is very low, but still you have to be mindful of this.
Yeah.
All right. Mark.
I wish we had a list. I didn't keep track of that original list. It'd be interesting to see which ones they pulled off.
Yeah. I would not be surprised, Mark, if it was STEM, right? Just as we've talked a minute ago, STEM is no longer among the priorities. And so it's very possible that it would be STEM.
Yeah.
Okay. So on this note, let's move on to our favorite part of the live Q&A, answering the questions from...
Let's do it.
Okay. So I'll pull up the questions in the order in which we've received those. And the first one would be from Krita Nand. Do you know why there hasn't been a French draw since March 21st?
Yeah. Well, one simple reason is when they did those draws earlier in the year, they were large, massive draws. And so each year, like we've discussed, there's a certain number of French-speaking invitations to apply that are going to be issued. In addition to, remember, they're getting their quota also from individuals that are maybe drawn under a general draw, because the people that are scoring the highest, even in the CECs, and I shouldn't say general, the CEC draws, or even the category-based draws, French is just one component in terms of category, the specific categories, but French infuses everything else, you guys. And people that have French are ranking higher than everyone in all categories. So they don't necessarily need to do just French alone draws to hit their targets. And I think they're also seeing that the French, when they do a French only draw, that the CRS scores are quite low. And the important factor within Express Entry is high human capital, right? The best and the brightest that's why it was created. And I think they're recognizing that when they do too many French draws, that maybe the comprehensive ranking score of the lowest successful candidate is maybe below kind of the level where they'd really want it to be. Because we've seen draws under 400 for French right now.
Yeah. And then the other one would be kind of similar. Could the biweekly CC draws be back?
Yeah, well, traditionally that had been the pattern. And then we saw draws happening, every week, and we would just alternate. If we look historically at kind of the patterns, we have seen our CEC. So, it's possible, this week, could we see another CEC? There was always a paired PNP CEC kind of rhythm that they had going there, and it's possible. We know, once again, through this new plan that they've released, that in Canada, applicants are continuing to be an important target for them. And I'll be honest, Igor, I just don't get it. I was looking at the numbers, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of international students still coming in, and I don't get it. I understand the schools need the money, and they bring in lots of revenue. And when you look at the statistics in here, they like to focus on the revenue and the generating of dollars to the federal coffers by students.
Yeah,
but
follow the money.
Yeah, but they don't talk about the fact that if you're letting in twice as many international students each year as you have overall room in permanent residence, we're not even talking about the work permit categories. Well, you're just perpetuating heartache and just turmoil, because so many people who have come to Canada as international students did so with the hope that a permanent resident option would be available to them. And personally, I think our priority needs to be those that are in Canada. All of you that are watching this in Canada who are wondering, what happened? Where did your dream of staying in Canada go? Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think we should drastically reduce the number of new incoming international students, and until we've got things leveled off with the individuals that are here, and not place so much emphasis, excuse me, in hitting that 5% target by getting people out. we can hit that 5% target if we just transition people to permanent residents that are here already and just slow down the intake of new folks. So
I'm really concerned, like as we speak about it, I'm really concerned with this sentence here. That 40% of overall PR admissions will be from those who are already in Canada. 40%, not 60, not 70, but 40.
40 is still low. And when you think of the overall numbers, like if we're bringing in, I think the figures are, what is it, over 300,000, I think, or at least 100,000 a year, I'd say, international students. I can't remember exactly what the statistics show for their projected admissions. But those numbers are far outstripping the available spots. And even 40% is well under the numbers that they're admitting. So you can see, Igor, if you just go back down to that chart you were just at, you can see actual results. Well, all they're looking at is the total monetary contribution of these visitors and international students, right? And that's great. I love that you got a 36 billion target for resources. But the reality is it doesn't matter if the numbers that are coming in are and they're people that want to stay, you are setting people up for failure. And it's crazy. Yeah. 40% is absolutely low. Yeah. I agree, Joy. They absolutely need to focus on people that are already here. And we see you guys. We hear you. We're constantly working with you. And it is unbelievably sad and heartbreaking. There are options for people. And I think the government didn't appreciate fully us immigration lawyers and those good immigration consultants out there that are going to do everything in our power to try to help you guys. And, one of the things we do a lot is we help you to understand really what your situation is. And if there are some actual viable alternatives or possibilities for you, that are not just people trying to get money out of you. And in our consultations, sometimes I have to have very difficult discussions with people and explain to them, look, the odds are really, really low that you're going to be able to stay. So don't just spend every last ounce of your savings to pursue options that are not going to have a good chance of success. And when I mean a good chance, sometimes people are willing. If there's a 15% chance, well, I'll take a run at it because I've got so much invested. But there are individuals there that are, encouraging you to file refugee applications, are peddling these fake narratives, these bases of claims that are not founded in truth. And you want to avoid that at all costs, even if it means, when you file a refugee claim, you get an open work permit, you can continue working, but it is a dead end. So please go back, subscribe to our Canadian Immigration podcast, especially the Time's Up series. There is a constant flow of really, really up-to-date good information trying to educate you on what you need to do. So please do that or watch it on the YouTube channel. It's video form, either of those. We'll continue to do everything we can to help you guys.
And all the links to our podcast, to our YouTube channel, to our DIY courses are in the description under this video.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next question. This one is from Usama. So does remote job work experience count towards FSW eligibility? I'm in London. I understand London, Ontario, and working for a company in Pakistan as an accountant. Yeah. Awesome question.
Yeah, Usama, this is one that lots of people are asking. And the reality is possibly. Okay, possibly. We know that if the work that you are conducting is not domiciled in Canada, it is outside and you're working remotely. If things are structured properly, it is possible to claim that experience. And lots of people, I remember doing a video, must be a year and a half, 2 years ago now, Igor, on the kind of a unique strategy to increase your CRS score. And one of the strategies was to actually go home and work, for a year, gain that 1 year of work experience, and just watch how many extra points you can get through the skill transferability section. And so I was advising people on that. And this is very much so a possibility. One challenge people have, Usama, is when they are trying to also work full-time in Canada and gain CEC points as well as FSW, and that ain't going to fly. So you can't double up. they're only going to give you credit for 30 hours at a time. And they don't talk a lot about that. So people assume, well, okay, you're only going to give me 30 hours a week for my foreign work experience, and then 30 hours a week for my Canadian experience, because it's two different types of work experience. Well, they're not going to let you double dip. And so you're not going to be able to gain 2 years of overall experience in your occupation by working 2 jobs at the same time. But if you are in a position where, I don't know, maybe you're on a visitor status and you have a remote job that allows you to work for a company in Pakistan, maybe there is the possibility of claiming it, but you have to set things up right. And every situation is just a little bit different. Sam, I encourage you to book a consult and we can chat about this further.
Yeah. And I was just trying to find a screenshot that was providing an answer from the IMRAPs on exactly this question.
Mm-hmm.
And the rationale was, if you're not working for a Canadian employer from inside Canada, then that is not a Canadian work experience. And if it's not a Canadian work experience, then what other work experience is that? That's foreign work experience. But again, as Mark mentioned, there are some nuances that you must always be aware of before you proceed with claiming this experience. All right. The next one is from Esiana. So, can minors who are on a valid visitor record, whose visitor's visa is expired, renew their visa from within Canada?
Yeah, Estiana, this is hard because your question doesn't give us everything that we need. This is one of the challenges, because I know it's specifically you. Can my child whose visitor record is expired? Like, sometimes people frame it in general terms, and it's a good question, but one of the things we don't know is how far expired is that visitor visa, right? That anytime you are on any document that is expired and then you're applying to restore, the moment you apply to restore does not authorize you instantly to continue in maintain status of some form to return back to that status instantly. You have to wait until the decision is made. So, for example, if you had a child on a visitor record and that child's visitor record expired and you hadn't applied to restore it, but then a week or 2 weeks after you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot to apply to extend, and then you submit a restoration application, technically and legally, that authorization does not come back to continue studying until you actually receive the document or it's been approved. And so lots of people don't understand that. We see this a lot with work permits, where someone's work permit expires because maybe the labor market impact assessment hasn't come back fast enough, and then they get the LMIA and then they immediately submit the work permit. Well, there may be some policies in place that, if you take some extra steps, might allow an individual to continue working sooner, but those policies are outside of this discussion. And if a person is working and their work permit is expired and then they are applying to restore their status, they cannot return to work until that work permit is actually approved. So you have to be very mindful of that and really be on top of the expiry of your documents.
And Esiana, I would want to share this webpage. So, visitor visas for workers and students, how to apply from inside Canada. Check the requirements, who's eligible to apply for a visitor visa from inside Canada. So you must be in Canada, hold a valid study or work permit, want to leave and return to Canada in the near future, and have an existing visitor visa that's expired. And because a minor would typically not have a study permit but be in Canada on a visit record, it's possible, but we still have to refer to this requirement, hold a valid study or work permit. So in your situation, because it's very specific question to your exact circumstances, would ask that you reach out to us.
And you can see, Igor, go back to that screen. I just want to point something out. So the question was, whose visitor visa is expired, right? That's what Esian is asking. And then if you look at this, and this is where it just drives me crazy sometimes, because in their efforts to be simple and basic in their answers, they say, have an existing visitor visa. Okay, yeah, you can apply to extend from inside Canada. That's expired or is about to expire. Well, there's a big difference between those two. And that's expired. Well, if it's beyond 90 days from expiring, well, then, you don't have the ability to restore from inside Canada, and they don't provide that qualification, at least not there.
Mhm.
So, and then I love when it says here, apply at least 2 months before you plan to leave Canada for TRVs and things like that.
Mhm.
Well, the reality is, with the processing times the way they are now, yeah, you're going to apply well in advance.
Mhm. No. Yeah. And there are also some consequences if you leave Canada before you get your visitor visa.
Yep.
So you may not be able to return back until the visa is approved. And what if the visa is not approved? Then it becomes a whole different issue.
Yeah.
All right.
Very challenging.
So the next one would be from Backman. We have Batman, we have Spider-Man, we have
Backman.
Backman now.
I need shoulder man. I need shoulder man. My shoulder is really sore. Too much pickleball.
So Backman is asking, for the permanent resident document checklist, how should the police clearance certificate be addressed for a degree that was completed remotely from a country that was never physically visited and is different from the country of residence? So what if you completed a degree from a university in UK, but you never actually lived in the UK, but the location of your study is UK? So how would you approach this?
Yeah, that's an easy one, Backman. You should be subscribing to our Express Entry DIY course. This is something I address all the time. And we've got our masterclass that's coming up, I think, next week, right? I think it's next Wednesday, is it? I think so. Yeah, and maybe it's today. I don't know. We'll see. I'm always looking at my calendar, not knowing what is coming next. It's a fast and furious world we're in right now. But in short, Backman, it all comes down to how you enter that information into your education, your study history. So if you're studying remotely, the instructions from IRCC specifically state that you are, it is today, 5 hours, 21 minutes. So I guess the master class is today. Does that sound right?
I don't know. I just checked our Outlook calendar and it shows like it's next week.
Actually, all right, well, we'll sort it out. We'll figure it out. But in short, Backman, if you are studying remotely and you're not actually in that country, then your place of study is actually your home. That's the location of study, not where the school is located. And in fact, when you're listing the name of the school, you're going to put, University of Manchester or whatever, and then by correspondence in parentheses beside the school name. And then that kind of triggers the officer to know that, okay, this is remote work. And when you put the location of study as being where you live, then you're never going to be in a position where you've got a request for a police clearance certificate for a country where you've never lived, right? So it's kind of intuitive, but unless you know exactly what IRCC's, how they want you to structure it, you could face a document checklist that asks for PCCs from countries that you actually don't need to provide them for.
Yeah. All right, Mark, let's pull up the next question. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions piling in. We love it. This is awesome. Boy, I missed it being away last week, Igor. I missed it being down in Denver. And it's the U.S. immigration world. I needed to go down there just to get a better idea of what was happening and to just understand what's happening on the ground, because we've got a lot of people looking to come to Canada. In fact, we have a special website that we've created. Hey, Igor, I don't know if you have the link to that, if you can find it, but we have a special website dedicated to our U.S.-based clients and those who are looking for options. And it's U.S. citizens every bit as much as it is other temporary residents in the U.S. But this site here is specifically geared towards our U.S.-based folks, and it covers all of the different things that we address when we're determining if Canada is an option for people. And it's just loaded with lots of information on the different pathways. And Igor created this while I was down there. And thank you so much for doing this, Igor. It's excellent. But it's a really, really neat tool to take a quick look and see. And obviously everything starts with a consultation, and we love doing those. So to all of those tuning in from the US, this is a great time right now to consider what options might be in Canada, regardless of our Liberal government wanting people to leave.
Okay. So Charlotte responded to our comments that Charlotte is one of the best
A
candidates.
consult, book a consult, Charlotte, and we can walk you through the whole process. And you are the best candidate for one reason. Well, there's probably many. You're probably an awesome individual that would just make Canada a so much better place by you being here. But you speak French. So Express Entry is a francophone program now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So the next one is from and is asking if you're eligible for the Francophone Mobility work permit. I understand. Do you have to exit Canada when you get the work permit, or is it possible to change directly from open to closed work permit without leaving Canada?
Yeah, great question. Hey, if you've got that at least a CLB 5 or NCLC level 5 in French in each ability, then absolutely you can transition from a postgrad work permit, an open work permit, like a spousal open work permit. You can absolutely transition to the Francophone Mobilité program from within Canada. Yep, we do that all the time for our clients. There is a little bit of an element to it that your employer needs to step up and do, which is a registration of the job offer, because it is an employer-specific work permit. And we assist our clients and their employers with this all the time. So any assistance you need, Abdurrahman, we are here for you.
Okay. So this one would be from another viewer of ours. Hello, team. I come to Canada.
Come on, Igor. Let's see you. Come on, pronounce that first name. Come on, man.
You put
got
me in
this.
an uncomfortable position. I'll just say Evariste. Okay.
No, let me see. So it's Nishimayamana. Yeah, Nishimayamana. Avarist. Nice, love it. Fantastic name. We love those.
Yeah. So Evariste is in Canada as an international student and now has a postgrad work permit. So this person would like to know how many CRS points, or not CRS points, how many, like what should be the score for the English test?
Yeah, in order to apply for PR. So there's often a difference, Nishimiyamana, in being eligible to apply and actually getting, an ITA, an invitation to apply. So for express entry purposes, you would say, well, if you're outside of Canada coming through the Federal Skilled Worker Program, you need to have at least a CLB 7 equivalent. If you're inside Canada going through the Canadian Experience class, you could have as low as a 5 CLB if you're working in a tier 3 position. But the reality is, are you going to score high enough to ever get a chance at getting an invitation to apply for permanent residence with a score that low? Is extremely unlikely. So then you shift to the various PNPs, and every provincial nominee program seems to have different things. Some award different scores of points depending upon your language. Alberta, it's like once you hit the basic level, I think it's a 6 maybe or something, you're capped out, and then you it doesn't matter if you have a CLB 10, you're still getting the same points within the expression of interest system. So each province has its own set of rules, but generally speaking, if you're to look at the very minimum, it's a CLB 5 for most programs. It wouldn't be much lower than that. Now, some might have, sometimes, reading and writing might be a 4 for some low skill positions in some PNPs, but generally speaking, it's at least a 5.
Okay. So this one is interesting. So Aisha is fluent in French, in English, 41 years old, only high school diploma.
Yep.
So the CRS score is about 345. If I remember correctly, do you think there is a chance in Montreal willing to move 2.5 years of work in category tier 1 and 3? It's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah. So have we seen a Francophone draw that's gone down below 345? I don't think so.
No.
And obviously your next birthday, you're losing another 10 points. And this is one of the challenges. You work in Canada and, maybe you work another year, you gain 10 points. So it's kind of a wash. You're kind of stuck. So I guess it comes down to your fluency in French or English. Like, how fluent are you? Are you maximizing your language scores? But realistically, it is not easy. So, 2.5 years of work. If you hit 3 years in Canada, Obviously, like I said, you're going to get then another 10 points. And really, it's what do you have overseas? Like, did you have foreign work experience? Can that be added in? Obviously, a high school is where you're losing all your points. And if you had a 1-year program, or you went and studied and got a 2-year program, that would have a significant impact on your score. So
Yeah. And one alternative I can think of, and again, this is a very theoretical possibility, but if you're fluent in French and you're willing to relocate, there's still a Francophone mobility work permit. You can apply for that one, move to a different province, obtain work experience, establish connections with another province, and then hope that they will invite you just because you speak French.
Yeah, French is the game changer. Absolute game changer. With French, even though maybe your scores are low and you don't have an option now, you can continue to extend those work permits under the Francophone mobility. There's no cap on it. So if you're experimenting, bouncing from one employer to another, and so it's you've got flexibility to just buy time until this crazy world we're in right now settles down, and then maybe opportunities open up more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this one is actually a very good question. So if I receive a job offer and then a community recommendation from one of the RCMP communities, Rural Community Immigration Pilot, thereafter I applied for my permanent residence, can I apply for the work permit while in South Canada on a visitor status?
Interesting. That is a good question.
So, Mark, one thing that I wanted to refer to is the requirements on the work permits, like who can apply, right? Who can apply from inside Canada? So you must have a valid work permit or study permit, and you're waiting for a decision on an application for permanent residence.
Yep.
So it's possible, but like you would need to get in the
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough when you're on a visitor status. There were policies during the pandemic that allowed individuals to make work permit applications from within Canada. But generally speaking, the general rule, Arinzi, is that if you're on a visitor status, you can't apply from within Canada for a work permit. So we need to look at the specific circumstances for sure.
And even here, Mark, they limit the PR application only to spouse and common law partner, family class, and TRP.
Yeah.
So, Arinze, here's the little triangle for you.
Yeah.
And if you need help, please go to our website at holtelaw.com. All right. So the next one would be from Video. That's a peculiar name. Can I apply for a spousal open work permit after submitting a spousal sponsorship application, even though I haven't received an acknowledgement of receipt yet? And
there is a provision if your work permit is expiring within 2 weeks, I believe, where you do have the ability to apply for a spousal open work permit upon submitting your spousal sponsorship application. But generally speaking, if that's not the case, the answer is no. You have to wait for the acknowledgement of receipt before you can actually submit that work permit application. And so this is it's been around, like for years and years, we were able to file spousal open work permits concurrently at the same time as the actual spouse common law partner in Canada class. We would submit those together. And then I still remember being on the national executive, being in Ottawa, sitting in these meetings, and they slowly moved to an online system for spousal sponsorship. And then I remember the day when they notified our CBA executive, I think I was the national chair, that they were no longer going to accept work permit applications that were included with the spouse common law partner, and that you'd have to wait for acknowledgement of receipt and then submit it. And then very quietly, they kind of released this. And what's the date on this? I can't remember. It's been a while, but does it show the date? What do we have there?
May 14th.
Okay, so they've even updated it even more recently than when it was first announced. But if you zoom in there, you can see who's eligible to apply without an AOR. It specifically states there you can only apply if you meet both of the criteria. So your work permit, study permit, whatever it is, temporary status will expire in 2 weeks or less. And this is a good example of someone who's on a visitor status, right? Temporary resident status, who is eligible to apply for a work permit. So that's one of the distinctions between the other situation where generally the rule is no. You've applied for PR under one of the following classes. And before you could only do it if it was the spouse common law partner, not the family class, but now both are inclusive. So, and people do file under the family class from within Canada all the time. So,
yeah. And Mark, there's a follow-up question from the same viewer. What's the current timeline for the of receipt?
Yeah, like I had one come back at the beginning of the year, remarkably fast, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And it isn't taking an extraordinary long time. They're moving pretty quick. I don't know if you've had one that's more recent, Igor.
I'll just share the insights from our CELA network, where our colleagues share their experiences. So
I remember that.
Let's see. So PR submitted March 13th, and the AUR is March 25th.
Yeah, so really fast.
Submitted February 25th, AUR March 5th. February 15th, AUR February 26th.
Yeah, and so as low as 2 weeks even in some instances, which is pretty darn good. So now with that being said, why are they doing this? There's always a push and pull with all of these decisions the government is making. So if they're going out of their way to allow people to get work permits to work as quickly as possible, well, at least submit them. Then what's going to be the likely consequence of them, giving in one hand and then taking away in another? Well, it's the processing times. And it would be fun, Igor. Let's just take a look at the in Canada sponsorships. How long is it taking? Last I checked, it was like 3 freaking years.
Yeah.
So what do we got there if you can find it?
So let's see. Spouse living inside Canada, outside of Quebec, 34 months.
Nice. So what that basically means is, come on, guys, don't complain. You got a work permit. You can work, Sure, it'll take a little longer for the spouse common law partner, but, and then if you're separated from your spouse, they're living outside of Canada, then they try to expedite those, because built within the pillars of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, as long as it exists, which is our current legislation, is the reunification of families. And obviously, if you're here living with your spouse, well, you're already unified, so there's no need to reunify you in Canada because you're already here. So as long as you can work, then you got nothing to complain about, right? Well, that's the theory.
Yeah. Mark, I'll break the sequence a little bit.
Sure.
We'll pull up this comment from Tanakia. Been listening for a few months now, and this is the first time commenting. Big thank you for the platform. Keep me up to date with all things immigration, watching from Fort McMurray.
Awesome.
So, thank you so much, Tanakia, for joining the force of our viewers and leaving your first comment. We're really happy to see you here.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Mark, let's return back to the questions. So,
yeah. We can maybe rapid fire a little bit, Igor. I'm just looking at the clock here. And normally we do extend out past 11. Sometimes we'll go 11:15, 11:20. But today we've got a little bit of a harder stop at 11. So maybe we'll rapid fire this. Okay. Is it possible for a U.S. citizen admitted in McGill to get permanent residence? Yeah, it is possible, Gardy. But, what does a possible mean? Well, it depends on a whole lot of factors, including the decisions that the government make. I'll let you in on a little secret, Gardy. So one of my favorite federal court cases, oh boy, it slipped my name now. The actual, I can't remember exactly the details on the case, but I'll describe it. It was a young girl who was doing, I think, a master's or PhD at McGill. And of course, McGill is located in Quebec. And she wanted to apply through Express Entry. And when you're applying through Express Entry, you have to show that you are living outside of Quebec. And so in her case, her application got rejected because she was still studying at the time in which it was approved. But she was able to show a whole bunch of different things to show that, no, she has intent to leave Quebec once her program was completed. So it's possible. It is. Igor, I'm going to let you just take over just for a minute or two here. I've just got someone that just pulled up to my door. Nothing like crazy stuff going on right during a live stream. Seriously, if I deal with this, then maybe we can go a little bit longer. I wasn't anticipating on them coming this early. So that's what happens when your office is your home office. Do you hear that, CRA? This office is my home office. Okay. Be right back. So,
all right. So let's move on with the next question. So this one would be from Backman again. So can the reference letter and bank statement be enough to prove work experience for Express Entry? So Backman, here we would be going to the Express Entry completeness check. So let me just share my screen. And when you scroll through the requirements for the documents, you can see mandatory documents for all applicants, right? And so you scroll all the way to the proof of work experience, and here are the requirements for the work experience reference letters. So if your reference letter includes all of these details, and you also have bank statements just to show your salary, the bank statement is not a mandatory document, but it's always good to provide some extra to the officer to avoid any possibility that the officer might get concerned with whether you were getting paid. If you ask about bank statement just because your reference letter did not include one of the essential elements that they ask for the reference letter, it becomes a lot more tricky. And we need to see exactly what's mentioned in your reference letter. But if your reference states your salary, states the hours of work that you performed in a week, it should be sufficient, like as long as all other requirements are present. If not, then sometimes we would refer to some other documents that would, in combination, provide the officer with all information that he seeks.
Yeah. If only, Igor, if only there was like a course that talked about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if only there was a master class where you could get your specific questions on Express Entry answered. Oh, my friend, this is something people wrestle with all the time. And you get a reference letter back from your employer. It doesn't list your wage, right? It doesn't list your salary. It doesn't list anything. Well, what do? Well, you have the onus of proving that you have actually work experience that was paid. And so then, like Igor said, you scratch and claw for every piece of information you can to establish that. Now, it's different too when you have pay slips and pay stubs available. Fantastic. The ideal that we always, recommend to our students and to our clients when we're reviewing these applications for them is that you have a good solid reference letter that contains everything IRCC is looking for, including your wage, that you have pay slips and pay stubs available. If you're claiming, 3-4 years of work experience, you don't need to include every single pay slip, right? But we definitely want to include a few from the beginning, maybe 1 or 2 for each year, and then the last 2 at least. And then in the letter of explanation, which we also teach our students to include, as well as our what we call our NOC selection tool that describes exactly how you've chosen the right NOC. We also have a section there that says, hey, please note, I have all my pay slips, but you've given me 4 megabytes of space to upload them. And, and I don't think you need to look through every one of my pay slips, but if you need them, I have them available. But in the interim, here's what I've given you. And so we always set it up. And the goal for Express Entry now is to leave, oh boy, it's to leave zero margin for an officer to be able to use discretion negatively. I'll describe it as that. So the onus is on you to prove. And if you're relying on bank statements, do those bank statements show the name of your employer? And I've done recently some procedural fairness letters for a bunch of clients where they were trying to use their bank statements as proof that they were being paid. Well, sometimes those bank statements are not perfectly matched with the name of your employer. And so you have the onus of explaining, that those funds are attributed to that employer and that's your regular compensation. And it matches up with what your reference letter says. I had another situation where my client had, when they, had a procedural fairness letter and they came and they hired me to help them, they had other payments coming from the employer as well, which then started to confuse the officer, wondering if this was really a legitimate thing or whether the person was maybe even self-employed themselves. There's a whole bunch of things, this can of worms that gets opened up. But if you do things correctly right at the beginning, you structure it properly, you can succeed.
Mark, we'll wrap the live Q&A up.
We can go a little bit more.
In a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we can go a little bit into a little bit of OT here. I know there's a ton of people that have got questions, and my goodness, you guys, Igor and I would love to be here like for 2 hours, every Wednesday and answer questions. But the reality is, it's just, there are so many people booking consultations that we have to make sure we carve out enough time for them, because otherwise Igor and I are working from 6 a.m. to like 8 p.m. at night. And that's not sustainable for our mental health as much as it is for the quality of consultations we offer to all of you wonderful people. But yesterday, Igor, I think I had 13. So 13 consultations yesterday. And then I had a wind-up activity with the little kids in our their 8 to 11-year-old boys that we have in our activity group. We're doing a final swim party at one of the leaders' houses with the families and the parents, and that was our wrap up. And then we had our final language school wrap up right after that final class. And then after that, we had a meeting with all of the stakeholders of our language class to figure out what we were going to do in September and how we're going to expand. So needless to say, yesterday was a busy day for me, and today is a little bit slower, but this is what I live for. This stuff right here, answering questions.
Yeah. All right. So we'll use the time to answer a couple of more questions. So Apex Prime is asking, so if the bank is refusing to give attestation letter for GTS, does he have any alternatives?
I don't know. That's one, Apex. I don't know. It's as simple as that. I don't have an answer for it. It's disappointing when banks, because what is an attestation, right? Like at the end of the day, lots of organizations are refusing to do attestations for immigration. In the process of the labor market impact assessment, companies also have the ability to provide other CRA data. So an attestation isn't always a mandatory component. It's not. There's alternatives, payroll records, statements of profit loss, right? And so these are all things. And even with the bank, like if you remember, for years, Igor, within the temporary foreign worker program, either an employer or an accountant could provide an attestation of the business having the capacity and financial ability to support the job offer that they were seeking to apply for. But then they started to ratchet that down. But even before then, the professional accounting associations would advise their accountants, well, you're not really in a position to give any kind of an opinion on the business viability of your client. So they would discourage them to even do the letters, a number of years ago. So I don't really like the attestations, but at the end of the day, yeah, lots of banks won't even give proper reference letters or letters for express entry. So it's not surprising. But is there an alternative? Well, I don't know. It depends on the company, right?
Yeah. This one I would pull it up from Jaden. So Jaden is on the verge of submitting his PR application, and the question is, I have foreign
full-time 1.5 years of work experience
with the same employer, but there's a 1 week gap.
Yeah.
Do I meet the FSW criteria for continuous employment?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question. Like I'll give a general answer, but you got to book a consult, my friend. Like this kind of stuff, my whole application is resting on this comment essentially that I'm posting in a YouTube live. Like this is a tough one because I don't know what all the circumstances are. Here's what I'll give you, because I always want to give something. I'm not just going to say, hey, book a consult. Then people are like, Mark never answers the difficult questions. He just tells you to book a consult. Well, no, I don't want to get myself into trouble giving an answer that Jatin relies upon, and then it's not correct because I don't have the full story. Consults are everything for me. Because in that consult, I can get the information that I need to make sure that the legal opinion I'm giving, which is a legal opinion, that Jatin can rely upon it. Okay. So he says, I have a full-time 1.5 years of work experience with the same employer under the same NOC, but there's a gap of 1 week at last week of the year, New Year's. Do I meet? Well, the question is, if you don't have one continuous year, like where did that gap? What is the start? What is the end date? Are you saying that you had a gap of 1 week within the first year? Like some people, maybe they have a gap between the 13th and the 15th month. So then they've hit the 1 year mark. But if it's within that first one continuous year, it could be an issue. But then you also don't tell me, what was the gap? Like, was it just a regular paid vacation? If that's the case, then it may not be an issue. If you were laid off for a week and then they brought you back, then it could be. So I hope you can appreciate, Jatin, and everybody that's watching, that we have to be very, very careful with the actual legal advice that we're providing, not to do that on this live stream. General information, answering general questions, we'll do that till the cows come home. But when it comes to actual specific legal advice, Jatin, book a consult. Let's take a look, and then we can actually tell you, because it serves you no purpose of submitting, right, if you don't actually meet it. Yeah.
All right. Amy is asking, I've applied for restoration as a visitor because of expired postgrad work permit and still awaiting a decision and get an ITA. Can I apply for permanent residency in the meantime while the restoration application is still pending? I hear it's a non-compliance. Is that true?
Oh, Amy, I wish that you were here in person. And then I'd say, who do you hear from? You hear from who? So if you've legitimately applied, so your postgrad is expired and you'd have applied to restore your status as a visitor, and if you get an invitation to apply, there's nothing stopping you from submitting your permanent resident application. Okay. So you can do that. As far as non-compliance, well, having a work permit that's expired and you apply to restore your status within the 90 days, which I'm assuming is what you've done, it would not be considered non-compliance for the purposes of permanent residence. So,
yeah, this one is very interesting. So, work permit is expiring next month. 550 CRS points. If there is no draw, does one have to immediately stop working and resume working when the draw happens?
Yeah, thanks, Kerr. This is a great question. Okay, so Kerr Boren, here's my answer to your question. So if your work permit is expiring, next month, unless you've applied to extend that work permit before that work permit expires, then you must stop work, full stop, regardless of the points, regardless of anything else. So points 550, that's fantastic. Here's crossing our fingers that there's a good old CEC draw for you. If there's no draw, you say, do you have to immediately stop work? Well, regardless of the draw or no draw, you still have to stop work and resume when the draw happens. Hell no. You can't just start working again because you receive an invitation to apply. In fact, I will reiterate to everyone, I kind of mentioned this before, when your work permit expires, even if you are restoring your status, you can't immediately start work. So you would have to wait until your new work permit was received to be able to return to work. So in your case, if you got an ITA after your work permit expires, you stop work, you submit your EAPR. When you get your EAPR back, if you're within the 90-day window to restore, you can actually restore to a bridging work permit in some cases. So you can have a work permit that's expired, and within 90 days, you've submitted your EAPR, which is effectively you get your AOR for express entry almost instantaneously. Then you take that and you can restore to a bridging work permit. But under no circumstances does just having a draw or an ITA allow you to resume just of its own merits.
All right, Mark, do we have time for a couple of more?
Yeah, let's do a couple more. We're good. Okay. I dealt with my issue here. We're good.
Perfect. So Siana is asking, is it usual to lose 5 points on my husband's birthday? I'm the principal applicant and added his details to my EE profile. I lost points on my birthday, and a few months
Yep.
later, I lost another 5 points.
Shouldn't be that way, Asiana. So unless like the only way that would be, I'm trying to think, how could you lose points? The only way you lose 5 points is if, birthdays. So, but there's no point loss for your husband's birthday. So you said a few months later you lost another 5 points. Well, I'm trying to think. The only time people lose points is if say the work experience they were claiming is too old and then it drops off the back end, or trying to think, even the expiry of documents doesn't. If you had an education credential assessment that expired, maybe it was older than 5 years and then you lost education points because of that. If your language test expired, your whole application would, your profile would cancel. So Asiana, I'd recommend you book a consult, because I don't know, there's got to be an issue. Yesterday I had a consult, Igor, with a couple who received a notification of interest from Alberta through their expression of interest. And they're like, this is great. Except I'm drawn under the Alberta Opportunity Stream and I'm on a spousal open work permit. And I said, okay, that's not possible. And I said, I reviewed the expression of interest portal that the province created before it was released. Myself and another couple lawyers, we gave them specific feedback on the structure of it. They actually tested it. And I don't think there was any way to not advise them that you were on a spousal open work permit, which would remove the possibility. And so we got on the call, and this is one of the beautiful things about the consultations that we do. I had them log in and share their screen with me, and very quickly I saw that they'd listed the type of work permit as a postgrad work permit and not a spousal open work permit. And so unfortunately, I said, look, you're going to need to reach out to them and tell them that you're not eligible, and not to have this expression of interest tied up in something and then have them, reject it, or just have it appear like they don't even respond, and then, they pass on them the next time. So I said, you need to go talk to them, let them know there was a mistake, get a new expression of interest in the system, and keep your fingers crossed. So these things happen a lot, simple little mistakes. And yeah.
Okay, let's pull up this one. So Prakshit is asking, I have 4 duties that match out of 7. Would that be enough?
Fantastic. Once again, man, I wish there was some kind of a comprehensive, phenomenal course on express entry that would just deal with these issues. There's only somewhere. Anyways, so in a perfect world, there'd be something like that. But I'll answer your question. And generally speaking, the definition is a substantial number of the main duties. So your reference letter lists duties that match with the substantial number of the main duties listed in the NOC. And you can demonstrate you perform the activities in the lead statement. Well, the interesting thing, Prakshit, is that you have some employers that are so large, your role maybe, or the role for that one particular, NOC position is actually split into 3 different people because it's so hyper specialized. And in those circumstances, you may genuinely be working in that position for this big company, but you only performed 4 out of the 7 duties. If you were to say, well, what's kind of substantial? Well, maybe 7 out of 10, right? Maybe 70%. 4 out of 7 is less. I would have rather had 5 out of 7 for you. But there are so many ways that we can explore this, because sometimes the reference letters themselves, they don't list what you actually performed, like not all the duties. And so you have the ability to go back to your employer and say, hey, I actually did do this other duty, but it's not listed in my reference letter. And then we get it amended and corrected to properly reflect what you did. In other situations, like I said, the positions are so specialized that you just don't hit all of them. And so then guess what you do? You use a NOC selection tool like we have in our course to explain to the officers, and we use it for all of our clients that retain us as well, to explain to the officers how the duties match or don't match, why they don't match, and why they don't matter, because you're still really doing that role. So you have the onus of proving it. And so many times I've seen people just submit a reference letter and just cross their fingers. There's no way in this world, you guys, I would leave it up to an officer to just try to decipher this cryptic job description in a reference letter, and then they themselves match it up. And I don't trust their version of Chat GPT either. We have a nice little custom GPT that we've tailored for our course that's phenomenal and really good and free with those who subscribe. But at the end of the day, we still tell our clients and those who subscribe, our students, you still don't trust it. And so when officers are zipping through and using their tools to determine which knock, I would rather lay it right out there in front of them and say, here's how everything matches up. Here's the duties in the job description for the profile. Here's the duties listed in my reference letter. This is how they match. This is where they match. And I've performed 4 out of 7, but that's still a substantial number. So advocate. That's what you do for yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes you would also exclude other knock codes and explain why other knock codes that are similar would not work and would not apply to your position.
Yeah, this is the only one that's available, officer. So if you don't agree with this one, well, then what is it? And if you don't agree, we're going to be having a little trip over to JRville to have someone else determine who's right. Right?
Yep. Mithun is asking,
please answer my question. Mithun should have put that all caps. I love those ones.
Yeah. Do I need to provide proof of funds if I meet the CEC eligibility criteria, but my status is now expired and I will be applying from outside Canada?
Nope. If you meet CEC, whether you're inside or out, proof of funds are not required. Full stop.
Yep. So you don't need to show that you have enough money if you're applying under CEC. No equal fire.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I think I do have a couple of more. This one would be a good one. So can an employer issue 2 high-wage dual intent LMAs for a couple?
Sure. If they can demonstrate there's no permanent resident or Canadian citizen available to fill those roles, they can fill them with any foreign national they want. And whether they're husband and wife or, best friends or father and son or mother and daughter, doesn't matter. As long as you meet the requirements of the job. Yeah.
Yep. And then perhaps, Mark, this would be the last one.
Sure.
From Dika. I reside in Ontario, but I work in Quebec, near the border. I commute to work every day. Would the work location affect my chances of getting permanent residence? I have 570 CRS.
Well, the interesting thing is, when it comes to location, you just have to demonstrate that you intend to reside outside the province of Quebec. If you're already residing outside the province of Quebec in Ontario, then you've pretty much solved that issue. If you are commuting to work every day, well, you're commuting and that's a factor, but it's not, it would have to be to the extent where the officer says, oh, really, you're commuting and then you stay there the whole week and then go home on the weekends? If that's the case, well, maybe you've got a little bit more problems than someone who just drives and goes to work and then drives back. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that would be it for today. Amy is also thanking us for answering her question.
You're very welcome, Amy.
All right. So just to remind everyone, below you will see our websites. So the clickable links are in the description of this video. You can subscribe to our Expert Sentry course, the TRV course. You can join us for the masterclass if you're subscribed for the Expert Sentry course. To the best of our recollection, the next masterclass is next week.
I think it's next week. We'll have to update it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have just to modify our website a little bit. And then we will see you next Wednesday at the same time, 10 a.m. Mountain LA time. So prepare your best questions and we'll be happy to answer those. And until then, we'll say goodbye to all of you. And goodbye to you, Mark, as well.
See you next week. See you, Igor. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.